Yeah, it's so difficult. I realize that like any one of these topics would be father wounds, like my high school journey, the transition from seminary to back to a lay state, quote unquote. Like these are all like their own podcasts.
Right.
But so I entered seminary in 2010, and so I want to now share a little bit of backstory about Immaculata Ministries, which is the ministry that I helped co-found with a couple people, Steve Tatro. And also Beatrice Agola who lives in Kenya, Africa. So when I'm entering seminary, I want to do great things for the Lord. Beatrice, who's just she's such a rock star for the faith. Just someone who really is striving for holiness and just wanting to do everything, pouring her life out for the kingdom over there in Kenya, Africa. She was pregnant with her fourth child. I do not know her.
Wow.
I do not know her at this point in time.
Yeah.
I do not know her at all. Not from, at all. And so she, at this time, she's pregnant with her fourth child, and she has like what is like an uncurable skin disease covering her entire body.
Oh.
Kind of like seeping wounds. Like they don't know what it was. And
Leprosy?
And it wasn't leprosy, but not unlike that. It was not a good thing going on all over her body.
Yeah,
and the doctors couldn't figure out what it was. Dang. And she, very susceptible to this infection. And so she went to a number of doctors and they couldn't figure out what was going on. She went to one last final doctor. It was a Muslim doctor, and she got the same prognosis. We don't know what it is. You could eventually succumb to this if you're not careful. And so the remedy was he actually saw a rosary hanging around her neck. Being a Muslim doctor, he pointed at that as her prescription. Like, do you use that? And she's like, what, the rosary? And he's like, yeah, do you use that? And she's like, yeah, I pray this every single day. And the Muslim doctor said, that's your only hope. And she was just like, wow, okay. So I basically almost got like a death sentence, potentially. I'm going to abandon my 3 children, my husband. I may succumb to this disease with an infant in my womb. And so with no hope left, she clutches her rosary beads and she actually jumps on a bus to go to the center of Kenya. In the center of Kenya, they have a national Marian shrine in Subukia, wherein they had 2 national or world Eucharistic conferences for the Eucharist. So what are they called? The Conference of the Eucharist.
Yeah.
They're worldwide. They had 2
worldwide,
of them.
Eucharistic conference. Yeah.
Yeah, they had one in 1980 where JP2 of course went, and in 85 they had him in Kenya. Okay. And the Conference of Kenya's Conference of Catholic Bishops said, you know what? After these conferences, they said we have to establish a Marian shrine here in Kenya, Africa, and let's do it in the center of Kenya, Africa. And so they started this Marian shrine in Kenya, Africa, in Subukia, 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 Kenya. And so they built that shrine in 1980, I think it was like 87. And in 1991, there was a gardener, the head gardener. They had just built it. They just first built a tiny chapel and they blessed the grounds. A few months later, in 1991, a gardener was deforesting and moving some brush, and he found a wet patch of dirt. And he started to dig there, and out forth came a miraculous spring, just like Our Lady of Lourdes. And this thing has been gushing ever since. There's actually a lot of human deforestation and encroachment on the property right now, and they're actually starting to notice like a decreasing in the veracity of the spring, which is kind of scary. And of course, with the world and modernism on the rise and like all like the world issues, it's kind of scary to see like it's still going. The spring's still gushing, but it's like they're noticing like a decreasing, and it's like, oh my gosh, like,
it's a sign.
So anyways, Yeah, it's a sign, it's a symptom. So our Beatrice jumps on a bus and she goes to Sabukia. And she arrives in the middle of the night, and it's run by the conventional Franciscan friars. She arrives in the middle of the night, and she jumps off the bus and goes up the way of the Stations of the Cross, which you go up a steep and rugged hill. And it was raining, and at the top, that's where the spring is bursting forth. And there's a little chapel up there with the statue of Our Lady, and the spring is coming out of her feet, out of the bottom.
Wow.
And from all accounts, too, the water is very sweet. It's like, I gotta go. I've never been. And so Beatrice, it's raining. She's heavily pregnant. She's climbing up the hill, but it was still rough. There was no cement. There was nothing. So she was like slipping and falling in the mud.
Wow.
And she was like going unconscious. She was knocking herself out. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
the English is hard.
English is a hard language. And but she heard our mother's voice calling to her, like, and she was just saying, Beatrice, keep coming. And she would come to and wake up, and she would continue to climb and go unconscious again, and then hear Our Lady calling her. And finally, like, I don't know how long it took her, over an hour, to climb this little rugged hill.
Wow.
She got to the feet of Our Lady, and she looked up at the statue, and she saw our mother smiling at her, the statue literally smiling and like nodding her head yes. And she just started drinking and just, gobbling up all this sweet water. And then she went back down the hill where she met another pilgrim. She finally kind of, cozied herself on down the hill. It was very difficult for her. And she met another pilgrim, and it was in the middle of the night. And thank God a Franciscan was up in the middle of the night and said, oh my gosh, ladies, what are you guys doing? Come stay in our retreat house. And they got to sleep in a little bunk together. And then in the middle of the night, Beatrice had a dream, and it was Our Lady who appeared to her. And Our Lady said, Beatrice, thank you so much for coming to visit me here in Sabukia. And for that, I'm going to come visit you in Maigori, Kenya, where she lives. And she woke up right after that, and she was like, oh my gosh, Our Lady appeared to me. And she kind of spooked her fellow pilgrim. And she's like, what's going on? And she said, Our Lady appeared to me. She said she's going to come visit me. And so that ecstasy kind of lasted a while, you can imagine. And so the next day she told the Franciscan priest what had happened. Okay, well, what do we make of that? No one knows. But so we'll offer a Thanksgiving Mass. So they went to Mass the next day with the Franciscans and prayed for just God's blessings to continue to flow upon everyone who comes to this shrine. And the Mass ended, and when she was going home, the second she stepped foot on the bus, she looked at her skin, and it was miraculously cured.
Wow.
Completely healed. She went immediately to the bishop's office in Maigori, Kenya. And so the head bishop at the time was Archbishop Philip Anyolo, who Beatrice is very close with. Philip Anyolo. Philip Anyolo is spelled Anyolo. 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 And he said, well, praise God. Who knows what this means? He can attest to what was going on with her. They were very close. And he that she had the disease and now it's gone. That's all That's all he does. So he just encouraged her, hey, continue to do what you're doing, continue to pray, and God's will be done, whatever this means. And Bishop Philip Anyolo would end up becoming, he's now the president of Kenya's Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Wow.
He's the head dude in Kenya, Africa.
Yes.
And so that was in 2010. So I entered seminary in 2010. She's in Kenya receiving this amazing miracle. And note too, the day that the gardener dug on the ground was on the vigil eve of the Immaculate Conception.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is.
So we have a Lord's connection there. I am the Immaculate Conception.
Mm-hmm.
We are Immaculata Ministries. Like it's all, this is how all like the naming is like coming about. Of Immaculata Ministries.
Makes sense.
So flash forward a couple of years, I leave seminary in 2012. I'm going through that tough transition. God, I let you down. How can how are you going to use me now? I feel like a failure. You know me. You know I want to like be a starter on the team. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be
a
starter on another team.
Yeah, now I currently find myself on another team here. I feel like on the B team, with the whole like I'm just a lay guy now, boo-hoo. And like
that's funny.
So far from the truth, right? And so that now flash forward, Beatrice herself has another child. Everything's going okay in her life. Her marriage seems to be falling apart too. A different podcast, different story. Her family's still intact, but she's going through a rough patch, right? 2015 rolls around. I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, God, like I'm still daily mass guy. I'm like, God, how do you want to use me? And she is going through the same thing, kind of resting on that promise of Our Lady. You said, Mom, you're going to come visit me. I haven't seen that yet. So she goes to mass one day in 2015, and they had a little grotto. It was more like a chapel dedicated to Our Lady, but the chapel had been run down, vandalized. It was literally collapsing in on itself. People had gone in there and smashed the hands off of Our Lady statue and chipped up her face. It was horrible. And it had literally just become a den of snakes. Literally. So Beatrice went in there one Sunday after mass, just reminiscing on like this promise of Our Lady. And she's kicking around the dead snake skins. And she goes and she touches the broken hand of Our Lady. And she's hit with this interior locution. Rebuild this house and I'm going to come to you. And so she's like, boom. And so that's kind of a fruit of an interior locution. If anyone's ever had one, it's like instantly when it happens, like peace, love, joy, courage, hope, like you're willing to die almost for this potential interior locution. Like if the locution says courage, you're filled with a courage so deep you'll run through a wall. You know what I mean? So that's what happened to Beatrice. And so so she immediately has this newfound courage to rebuild this broken down chapel with no funds, mind you. Yeah. And she goes to the priest and says, hey, I want to rebuild this chapel. And he's like, great idea. How about I'll give you the pulpit next Sunday and after mass, and you make an appeal to raise funds from the community. So she did that, but lo and behold, not a single dime rolled in.
Wow.
A couple of weeks later, nothing. And people were just like, oh, look at you, holy Beatrice. Like, oh, look at God. You think God wants to use you to do something great. And she was a teacher at a high school. And so kind of sick of that whole, treatment that was being thrown at her, all the shade that was being tossed her way. Yeah. She convinced a couple of the high school kids to grab some sledgehammers. and so she said, what we're going to do, boys, she got like 5 or 6 guys. And she says, we're going to man the chapel. We're going to outline the chapel. And when that mass gets out on Sunday, when the people start filing out, we're going to Jericho these walls. We're going to smash these walls of this broken down chapel in front of God and country, and these people who are lacking faith to do something great for Our Lady. We're gonna bust down these chapel walls.
Wow.
Okay, let's pause on that for a second. We're talking about no money.
No money.
Just gonna tear something down. What's the thought process?
Yeah, the thought process is faith. When God says move, he just wants you to take one more step. Just take a step. And one foot's always in the air, one's on the ground. And for Beatrice, when those sledgehammers start swinging, I can't think of a better image of 1 foot on the ground with a sledgehammer and 1 foot in the air with faith, with nothing to go on except God says move. You don't know where the next step is going to take you.
Yeah, That's sure.
Faith. That's faith.
You know what else is faith? What you're going to have with me today, because this short episode, the editing process is kind of weird. But if you just trust me a little bit, wait for the next episode. It's not going to be a whole week. We can't make you wait that long. So we're going to release 2 episodes this week. Just give us a couple of days. You'll get another one just to wrap up this beautiful story of Immaculata Ministries. Till next time, take care. God bless.